The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz, along with my guest co-host this week, Miles Maguire from the Oshkosh Community News Network. Tony is on vacation, a much needed vacation from what I understand, and I'm very, very happy to have Miles' presence here again this week. We're also very pleased to be joined by Dick Spanbauer, Richard Dick Spanbauer. On the ballot, I guess it's Richard J. Spanbauer. Dick is running for the 53rd Assembly District. He is the Republican candidate seeking to take over Cheryl Owens' seat, who's running for, I believe she's running for her 8th two-year term. Just for the record, we did send a request to Mrs. Owens to appear on the show. We've not yet had a response from her. I'm not sure if she'll be responding or not. She's not been real participatory in some of the other things that candidates have been invited to partake in. But we hope that we'll hear from her and be able to present her on a future show. There is no Democratic candidate for the 53rd Assembly District, so whoever wins, whether it's Mr. Spanbauer or Mrs. Owens on September 12th in the primary, they will be running unopposed on Tuesday, November 7th in the general election. So with that long introduction, welcome to the show. It's nice
Thank
to have
you.
back.
I am very pleased to be here, and I thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. You ran 2 years ago, and you lost in the primary. You had 2,666 votes to Cheryl Owens' 3,315. And then, of course, she defeated Luann Bird in the general election. So you're going at it again. What's prompted you to run again?
Well, for one thing right off the bat, I did so much work 2 years ago. I mean, I was in every single town in this election, every single town. I went to every single board meeting, introduced myself and talked with the board members, and really got a feel for the district. And the thing is that because of the work I did, I felt that I was, like, to call it a part two. In other words, I think I got a decent reception the first time. I think what killed me actually the first time was a Democrat primary. That's my strong opinion of that, because a lot of people normally would have crossed over. And I even had some people that I know that said, Dick, I'll vote for you for anything, but I'm kind of a liberal, or I'm a Democrat, and Luann is running, or they knew Steve Dito, and that's, you know, where I feel I should vote. And I said, fine, that's okay. But when Luann entered the race, I knew right away that it would be an uphill. Absolutely knew that. If it was just Dito, I felt that some of the people would still have crossed over for me, knowing that Steve would have went automatically to the November election, automatically that way. So, but there's, what has changed? There's nothing changed with Cheryl Owens. I mean, Cheryl Owens, you hear about her at election time, that's about it. We still need things addressed in Madison, and I still have the energies and the zeal for the job, and I think it's really still a time for a change, and that should not go unchallenged.
So what are some of the things that you want to address in Madison?
To me, it's always been the three. It's been the health. There's a lot of things, but the three major are the health insurance. That is a big issue. That still has not really been addressed. Keeping the jobs in the state of Wisconsin. We lose a lot of jobs in the state. Education has to be funded. We can't really shortcut education. That's the future of, you know, our society. Those are the three main issues. But above all is the fact, with me doing the whole 21 towns, the whole area, the last time, and I'm still getting it this time, by the way, there's a loss of communication. Now, Cheryl Owens will dispute that. I know she will, and that's fine. That's her prerogative. But I think let's put it this way. Even with a Democrat primary, if you look at the votes, I only lost by 5% of the vote. If you took the votes from the Democrats and my votes, Carol Owens was beat hands down, if you add those votes. In other words, I didn't even need half those Democratic votes to beat Carol Owens. That says something from the district, especially for first-time people running for that position. And that's the consensus I've gotten all over the district. And just today, I was down in the town of Fond du Lac, pounding on doors, doing the subdivisions and whatever. And you get more of a rapport and a feel with the people, and they get a rapport and a feel with you. But the same thing is true down there. They hear about Carol Owens at election time. There was something in the paper that she got an award for the farmers, and that's fine. There was something else she sent around on a flyer. But those 2 years in between, you don't hear from her. There's people down there that have voted for her but don't know her. In other words, what I'm saying is they've never seen her, never really heard her, but it's a name recognition.
Sure.
And they're glad to see somebody new running.
Well, let's go back to the issues for a second. You said health insurance. I mean, so that's a big issue. What do you think the state should be doing there? Same thing with economic development. I mean, those are
I'm very big on the fact of tax credits. I think that's the way our economy was jump-started, by tax credits. I like that idea rather than throwing money at programs. For an example, on health insurance and maintaining jobs, I think we do a dual road here. I think more manufacturers and industry would probably hire more people if they got a tax credit for the health insurance. For an example, if you hire so many employees, the state will give you $1,000 or $1,500 tax credit. Because here's the thing, if you hire those people and once they're working, when they're working, they're earning wages. When they earn wages, they're paying taxes. So you really get it back. And then you get more people working. Health insurance, though, goes even farther than that. The cost of the premiums are going up something tremendous. I've always felt, and I still feel, that there should be a cap on liability issues as far as malpractice suits and whatever on that issue. Some states don't. They have an unlimited cap, you know. I feel there should be a cap on it. When you talk about health insurance, you're talking about also drugs. Drugs that's a big one. There's people that are retired. I know many people that, there's a couple in particular really gets me, is they have Parkinson's disease. One is going blind, the other one's got epileptic seizures. They need their pills. It costs a fortune for the pills. I got a call at about 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I gave this example. It always sticks in my mind. 2 years ago, when I was on the League of Women Voters, and it was an issue I can't get out of my mind. I got a call. It was a friend of mine, and to come to the hospital. It was his wife. I went to the hospital, and he had seizures. By the time I got there, he was normal. He was straight again. What had happened was, the first words I asked him, I knew right away. I said, "Bill, were you skipping your pills?" And he looked at me sheepishly and he said, "Yeah, he can't afford them." And here's a 69, I think, yeah, 69, 70 years old he be now. He has to work a job to pay for that, for those meds. And it just shouldn't be in our country.
Well, you know, health insurance plagues all of us. There's approximately 91% of the people in the state of Wisconsin are covered by some kind of health insurance, whether it's, you know, something through their employer or Badger Care or what have you. But still, there's that other percentage, and it equates to about 440,000 people in Wisconsin who have no insurance. Some of them are, you know, our age or younger, and they're working, but they just simply can't afford it. They don't have any insurance at their job. If you're elected, Dick, what would you do to try to make sure that everyone in the state of Wisconsin is covered by some kind of health insurance?
The first thing, when you were mentioning about that other 9%, we'll say, that doesn't have insurance, I was going to go into it to the point here where I know for a fact there are people that will work for $8 an hour. $8, $9. I mean, the lower paying jobs is what I'm saying. The thing is, you talk to some of them, they say, "What's the sense in doing that? If I got to pay for my health insurance, I don't come out nowhere." I mean, you know what I'm saying? So I'm for expanding Badger Care, Senior Care. I really think that that's a good program. In fact, it has expanded quite a bit in the last 2 or 3 years. But that's a program for people that work at a, say, a retail business that doesn't supply insurance. If they do, the thing is that they don't pay for most of the insurance or half of it. Well, the state will then expand on that and give a credit for that. And that's one of the things that I'm really for.
It doesn't cover any single people, though. You have to have children in order to be covered by Badger Care.
Right.
So would you be in favor of expanding it even further then to make sure that everyone has some kind of coverage if they can't afford private insurance or they don't have any at work?
How do I say this? I'm for the families. Yeah, I'm talking about mom and pa and the 2 kids, 3 kids, or whatever. And I guess that's my main aim is with the Badger Care. However, you bring up a point as far as single people. I realize there's single people too that go work the $8 or $9 an hour jobs. In other words, they're not afraid to work in that, but they also need help. And if you're going to extend that, then extend it also for single people. You have to include single people. Because, by the way, when they're working, they pay taxes also.
Mm-hmm. So Dick Spanbauer would be in favor of expanding it to include everyone then?
I'll probably be called by some of the real conservatives a liberal on that, but no, I don't think I am at all. I think it's common sense that you have to take care of your own.
Let's talk about another health-related issue, and you mentioned Parkinson's. A lot of people think that additional stem cell research is perhaps the way to get a cure for Parkinson's. What are your thoughts about that?
I'm not for abortion. That's one issue. I think that's different with myself and the Democrats, and they respect me for that. I mean, we've talked about that. However, as far as stem cell, I'm not totally against that. What I mean by that is I can't see abortions, though, and using the embryos from that. What, for an example, I see right away as a help to stem cell is if you've got these clinics with people that are trying to have children and they have embryos, and rather than throwing them out or destroying them, I think those could probably be used for research. But I'd hate to see it being done because of abortion.
Okay. And also on the subject of health insurance, we know that salaries and benefits for public sector employees are just killing us from a taxpayer standpoint, and yet we're kind of in this catch-22 situation with contract negotiations and what have you. If elected, do you favor or would you favor taking some steps to control public employee health care costs?
Public employee health care costs, it's the same thing as what we just addressed here when I said something about expanding for people that are working. Yes, definitely you have to take care of the people that are working. You want to keep them working. You don't want them quitting, you know, for the sake because they don't have insurance and they got to go. I know people that'll leave the state and go to better jobs outside the state. Some places that offer better health insurance, better health coverage. There is teachers is one. I've noticed that. I've talked to a couple people like that. There's some businesses I don't think that are really friendly with Wisconsin as far as trying to expand. But our own state workers, to go back to that, actually I've got an endorsement coming from the state union workers, the AFL-CIO and the state correctional officers. But I do believe that we should make it affordable for everybody, whether you're working as a correctional officer or if you're working in a retail store.
Do you think that they should have to pay more than what they're paying? For example, if a public sector employee is only paying 5 to 10% of their total premium, do you think that they should pay more of a premium rather than putting it mostly on the back of the taxpayer?
Well, that's a hard question to answer. I mean, I guess you could say, where do we really draw the line? Sure, everybody would like to have it paid for 100%. You know what I'm saying? So that, I guess the question is, where do we draw the line on that? I think, to be fair, I think when you negotiate, if you're a union worker, I think health insurance should be an issue that you can bargain. And I don't think that's a bargaining issue with teachers as it is now, and also with correctional.
Okay.
Okay. Speaking of teachers and funding for education, you said that's an important thing to do. Do we need to spend? Well, let me ask you this question. One of the splits is between K to 12, and I'm a university professor, so I disclose my bias here, and then support for the UW system.
Certainly.
Do you think the current budgetary priorities are about right, or should the money be shifted one way or another?
Let's put it this way. I don't believe in cutting the 2/3 funding for the schools. And I think that was attempted here a couple of years ago with 65%. I think it's been restored, but I don't believe that we should underfund and undercut. And let me also say this, and doing research, even the last election that I ran, Wisconsin is not as ranked low as people think it is. And in fact, in the nation, it's not, it's ranked right up there. We're not hurting like to a point where I don't want to make it sound, or we shouldn't make it sound like teachers are really, you know, fleeing the state and they go in other places or whatever. We're not hurting that bad. What I'm trying to say is, by not cutting funding for education, is it's with the test results is another thing. I think we have good test scores. I think we have good teaching values by teachers. I think there's good standards. Whatever it takes to maintain that at the level that we have been maintaining it is adequate. Because you can't put a dollar, how can you put a dollar figure on that?
Sure. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of support for the K-12 education, but as we move into more of a post-industrial information society, the value of a college degree goes up and up and up. But what we've seen is actually reduction of state support for the UW system. What do you think? Is that
well, you're asking a difficult question, and I'll tell you why you are. It can be argued both sides. Yes, if we cut tuition, or I should say if we cut funding, that hurts the tuition.
Right.
As far as that goes. On the other hand, it's like the guy says to me, cut, 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 and I tell him, well, where should we start? And this is a common question, by the way, and it's like any place but don't cut me.
Right.
You know what I'm trying to say? So it's a very difficult question. I'm not trying to be evasive here, but it's a difficult question to ask, is how much do you fund? That's the question.
Right, and that's my question to you.
I will tell you this, and you can call it a politician's remark or whatever. The thing is, don't cut it to a point where we're sending people to other schools, adjoining states, because that does happen also. That's not to say they're going to other states because there's maybe a different field that they feel adequately, that would take care of them educationally more adequately someplace else. But I know it does happen. I know the tuitions are cheaper maybe out of state with one of the surrounding states.
Right.
And that might send people over that way. Because here's what happens. You generally, and I don't know the percentage offhand, when you do that, and these people graduate from Minnesota, or they've gone to Illinois someplace or whatever, they tend to stay there.
And that leads me to another question.
And that hurts, that can hurt the state of Wisconsin.
Sure. Well, let's say they go to school here, but what we hear about so frequently is them leaving Wisconsin to go somewhere else. It's the brain drain syndrome here. So what do we do then, Dick, to make sure that, okay, we've got them here going to school in Wisconsin. How do we keep them here after graduation?
The only thing I can think of offhand that hits me, and usually does all the time, is the fact, I think, by the fact of how did they do in school before they wanted to go to this college? I mean, what potential do we really have if we help somebody with tuition? What kind of a level of education has this person been coming? Is this person showing something really promising from the grades this person has? What kind of field is the person going into? Is it a medical? I mean, is it a legal profession? Is it technology? You got to consider those things. What fields would we potentially be losing if we didn't fund the tuitions? You follow what I'm saying here? I think those are the bases where you should maybe allow more funding for people going into specialized, school. Like I said, rather, being a doctor or.
So it sounds like you're saying there should be more in the way of tuition assistance, but not necessarily more financial support for the system as a whole, the UW system.
Yeah, because that's the question I'm hearing here is the tuitions, and that's the way I addressed it earlier by saying the fact that some of them are going out of state. But the thing is, what kind of people are we funding? Do we want to fund as far as tuitions? Do we do a grade system? I mean, this guy graduated straight A's from high school, wants to be a doctor, has taken the physics and the biochemistry type fields and the whole bit. Hey, you know what I'm trying to say? Rather than somebody just wanting to be a general, go to college and get a a general education, college education. You follow what I'm saying? If it's a specialized field, it says something where this guy really or gal shows a real promise, you know, as far as education goes. I mean, can we be selective without being discriminatory? Does that make sense of what I'm trying to say?
Sure, but then how do we keep them here after they graduate? And that goes to job creation again.
There's one thing you have to remember, Cheryl. On the campuses, when you graduate, even before you graduate, you have recruiters on the campuses. And, you know, if these kids, they know already, you know, to what degree they're going to graduate, high in their class, or, you know, that looks promising. I think they're more apt to stay in Wisconsin if a recruiter comes to the campus, you know, and says, hey, how would you like to work for John Deere as a biochemist or something, or a paper company or in northern Wisconsin or whatever. I think they're more apt to stay, or at least start off their careers in Wisconsin. When you go to another state, I think you have a tendency to be recruited by out-of-state people. And the kid's looking at the fact, hey, I got a good job offer here, good money, the whole bit. Maybe I better not, you know, blow this. Maybe I should take the job opportunity. I think it's the opportunity that's presented at the person at the time they're on their last leg, they're going to graduate.
So private enterprise being more active than
Definitely.
in a recruitment
Oh, yeah.
standpoint right on the campus.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think that Wisconsin has too many tax-funded services? And if so, which ones do you think should be either reduced or eliminated altogether?
That, you know, what gets me is the fact is when they're mandating that's things that we have to do. I think the courts is one system. As far as that goes, should the property tax pay for that, or should the state? There's certain things that state mandates at the court system. If they're mandating, then why don't they fund them, rather than put the burden on the local taxpayer? Does that make sense?
But are there other things that are taxpayer funded that you know, should maybe be reduced or eliminated altogether?
I'm not sure really where you're going with that. I mean, what kind of funds are you know, are you talking about, and for what areas?
Well, there's a lot of things that are tax
Well, we could be here for 2 hours. That's why I said if you could be more specific.
Well, I guess I'm asking you if I mean, maybe you don't think that there are.
Yeah, I think there's a general impression. I think there's a study that just came out saying, you know, Wisconsin is not as bad as on the tax list, but it's still the 6th highest tax burden or something.
Yeah, it still is.
And so the feeling is, you know, okay, politicians, you need to do something about this. And well,
they always say cut in Madison, and that's true. There's areas where I'm sure there could be areas cut. I said this 2 years ago, and I really believe it was more so then, because of the fact we had a boom, you might call it, for about 9 or 10 years. I mean, the economy was just going nuts. Federal government, state government had surpluses, the whole ball of wax. My point in saying that is, I'm sure because of all that money we had, there's a lot of programs out there that maybe we can do without and cutting. And one legislator I remember told me a while back, he said, actually you learn a lot more when you're down here. There's a lot of stuff you see, and you have a lot more access to things and what you're talking about, mandates and different things and how they are funded. Cut property taxes, everybody wants property taxes cut. The only thing I said before is which ones do you cut? You can only cut taxes so much. I'll give you a good example. You got the city of Oshkosh, you're talking about garbage fees. I mean, it's getting to be fees for everything. Storm water, museums, zoos, whatever. You know, you got to pay fees. Launch your boat, there's a fee. What gets me a lot of times, and I'm just making a general remark here, is the fact I think the point is clear where people that are on these city councils, village boards, whatever you want to call it, are afraid to raise taxes. In other words, what I think a lot of them would like to, you don't want to get on the bandwagon as seen as raising taxes, so you throw a fee in there. My point is, if you want garbage, and I'm only surmising this, is there any other way you can cut any more programs? If you honestly feel that you can't, then maybe you have to trip the taxes 8 cents. $1,000 or something, whatever it costs to fund the garbage. In other words, it becomes a reality where if you want services, you got to pay for them. And I'll tell you another thing. People complain a lot on taxes, but one of the most listened to complaints I listen to is really, what do we get for taxes when they increase? I mean, did we get a new road paved? Did we get this taken care of? Was this funded? You know what I'm saying? I guess in saying that, and don't misunderstand this, people don't mind paying taxes to a point if they're getting something in return.
Right.
It's when your taxes go up and you don't see no improvements. You don't see the city streets or the town roads being fixed or whatever.
You know, when you talk about the garbage fee, I mean, one of the reasons
I am part of the city of Oshkosh, by the way.
Right, right.
North of Murdoch.
Right, and one of the reasons that has been imposed is because of the levy freeze.
That's true.
From the legislature.
That's true.
So what, if you were elected, would you work to overturn
Good question. I'm against Tabor.
Okay.
Definitely against that and the taxpayer amendment, because I think that's just a snow job there behind the Tabor. The reason why I'm against that is I'm not a spend freak by saying that, but 2 years ago I sat on a little bit of a fence on that because I really didn't know what the issue was there. I knew at one point that it was the funding. They wanted to hold that back a certain percentage, and you only spend so much, 10% I think it was. But the problem with that was I didn't know if that was necessarily good for government, because you may need some services, or you may have a unique town where you have to expand. Our town of Algoma that I'm chairman for, that was just expanding like you couldn't believe. We're unique. We need funds. We need funds to put the roads in and do the work that is needed, okay? The fact is, with Tabor, that to me should not be legislated at the state. In other words, a guy that's representing Racine and the legislator is telling me what's unique and what I should be spending for my town. I think that's the job of the local elected officials. And I mean that even if it's city, town, or village. We know our towns, cities and villages more than somebody down in Madison. And besides that, that's what we're elected to do. You elect us to make those decisions about budgets and about paving the roads or picking up the garbage or whatever it is. I don't want that legislated down at Madison. I don't feel that's right. And besides that, I think it can hurt government, your local body. If you're trying to expand and you're putting in more of a tax base, I think if you're talking about a freeze and you can't spend over that levy, you actually discourage or hurt expansion of tax base in your own town or your city or village, whatever it may be. You don't want to discourage that. You want to expand upon that. And then the other guy might say, where I was on the fence, well, how do you show me, if you're against taxes, you show me I'm from Missouri, you know, the old saying. So you put it in writing. And I understand where that person is coming from also. But I think it does more harm in the long run when you put a freeze on something. It's not to give me a license to go spend and enlarge a budget. That's not what I'm saying here. But we're unique. We're one of 1,700 plus towns in the state of Wisconsin, and we have to be able to have that leeway, what we see fit, you know, as far as expansion goes, and to accommodate that. And I don't think that would be corrected by a tax freeze or a Tabor.
Okay.
In the town of Algoma, where you are the town board chairman, how did you all, as a town, deal with the levy freeze when it came down the pipe?
Well, I can tell you this. When I knew that this was going to happen, and this is, by the way, why I ran for the legislature. 4 years ago, I got a letter, I was chairman in Algoma, from the governor, and he said that he was going to cut our state shared revenue. Okay. The first thing I did, and anybody normally does in government, is you call your legislator, whether it be state senator or your legislator. And I can honestly tell you, and I hope Carol's listening, because this is exactly what she said to me. I asked her what she was going to do about that, getting that state shared revenue cut, and especially in the towns. We're hurt more than even a city or a village, and I'll get to that why. But the thing is, I said, what are you going to do for the state shared revenue? I called her up, and she said to me, she hee-hawed over the phone, I'll never forget this, and she says, well, she says, I think that's really just, I think that's the way, you guys are just going to have to cut the budget. You guys are going to have to bite the bullet, is what she said to me. Those words I'll never forget.
Typical response from someone in Madison.
Bite the bullet. And it was like what she was telling me, though, what I was getting out of, and I was not out of context, is the fact that she did not want to fight for it. And I proved that to myself by contacting other area legislators. They had they had answers to address the state shared revenue. They were full of the zeal to go down there and protect that, because that's a lifeline, you know. See, in towns you have to remember one thing. You guys live in the city. If you have, and I think this is a good example, if you're going to buy 8 buses for your transit, okay, and you're in a crunch, you can maybe get by a year or two and on your budget say, well, listen, let's do without new buses for a couple of years. Or we've got 5 people that are retiring. Okay, maybe in that field, maybe you don't have to pick up 5 to replace the 5. You got areas to work in. A town doesn't. The only way that we fund our budgets is by property taxes and state aid. That's it. We don't have, I can't call them luxuries, but we don't have the areas to go to cut, to fund us. And when somebody tells me that you got to bite the bullet, that's telling me that you don't want to fight for it. You know, if she'd have said, and any legislator should have said, well, you know something, you're right. Towns are affected by that. Let me see what I can do. I'll talk to some other legislators, and you know, we'll get something going. We'll form a team, maybe area legislators, and have a hearing and see what the input from the public is, or we'll do something. I didn't get that at all.
Well, I think the time to do that is before you make a decision to cut shared revenue. You know, it's proactive rather than reactive.
Yes.
So are you all in the town of Algoma because you're all under the same levy as we are in the city?
What I did.
Are you having to look at any kind of fee-based systems there?
No, the only fees that we have is our sewer fee that's paid once a year on the taxes, and then our garbage pickup, for that matter.
So you do pay a garbage fee there?
Oh yeah, we for years. In fact, we had to raise it last year. That was just a gas. I mean, that went up so much, and we had to allow that in our new contract with the waste management, for that matter. And we didn't have a problem with that, and the ordinary citizen doesn't either. They understand as far as that part with the gas and that. But as far as fees, there's another thing. I was reading in the paper about the fireplaces. That they,
the backyard fire pits.
There's a fee there.
Well, they want to put one in, yeah.
Last year it was the, everybody's got these blue pools. I got one now too, by the way, this year, and I love it. I really do.
You have to pay a fee for it in the town of Algoma?
No. You know, somebody asked me that, and they says, well, what, I suppose now you'll get the idea to do that. I said, no. I says, we're over-regulated now. I said, there shouldn't be a fee for every thing that comes through the pipeline here. And to me, it's just another way of getting dollars. And while that may say good, you know, sound good, you know, as far as getting money to help towards your budget, my God, people pay enough fees. Can't they enjoy a swimming pool? They got to pay a $25 fee. Now, the reason for that, I understand, I don't agree with totally, is the fact that then it can be inspected to see, you know, make sure there's a fence around it. Again, I feel we're over-regulated. I'm not against the safety of the neighborhood kids and stuff like that, but you know something? If these people would call their insurance companies, and I'm not saying in all cases this is true, and say, I got a swimming pool, I better tell you this for liability purposes or whatever, is there anything that I need to do? So in other words, if you do have a problem, you know, a kid gets, God forbid, drowns or something like that, what's your liability on this? You know, for that matter, that you better check with the insurance company to find out if you should build a fence, or even if you're insured for that. Some people may find that they're not. But no, to me, I just looked at it like it's another fee. You know, fireplace. Well, should I write that down? Yeah, I'll bring that up at budget. We'll tax them, let's see, 20 bucks maybe on that, $25 for all the blue swimming pools in the town. Is that realistic? Think about it.
Well, they seem to think it is here, I guess.
So, what is the garbage fee in the town of Algoma?
$119.
$119?
Yeah, it went from, I think, $98 or $99, something like that, to $119.
And that's an annual fee?
That's once a year.
Once a year?
Yeah, and I didn't think that was too bad. And that's recycling also. I mean, you put your leaves out, the whole bit. We do that from, like, I'm guessing May till around October 1st or November 1st. So we have garbage pickup, every other recyclables picked up, your leaves and stuff like that, and for $119 a year. I don't think that's a bad deal.
And is there a limit then, Dick, on how much trash they can put out? Do you have, you know, receptacles that people
have your
to
own.
use?
Well, like I was down in the town of Fond du Lac, some Onyx, I think they have down there. They supply the garbage cans or something like that. No, we buy our own garbage cans for that matter.
So you can put out 20 bags of trash? Or you
I've
put out
never
2
heard
bags of
a
trash?
complaint from Waste Management that that's an issue, and I think what they do, there's an arrangement if somebody has got some type of tearing off a roof or some project going on, or a house is being raised, or if somebody is moving it, they can call the waste people up and they'll make a special trip. I guess there's a fee for that from the Waste Management, you know, for that matter. But I know the city's got a problem trying to stay under that freeze and the whole bit, and I'm not ridiculing them, and it may sound that way, that they're putting fees to everything. But to me, sometimes, I think in general terms, it sounds to me like, sure like to raise taxes, but that doesn't sound good because I'm elected. The public won't like that, so let's throw a fee on. Does it, to me, I don't know how it rings in your ears like that, but it's always come across pretty much like that to me.
Well, and from my own standpoint, I would rather pay a little more in taxes than have the fees, because at least on the property tax bill,
Tax
it's deductible.
You want to know something? If the taxes would have went up that few cents or whatever, do you think you'd have as much controversy, maybe even elections that took place that changed because of that?
Sure.
Stinking what was it, $20 they wanted, or
For what?
garbage pickup in the city? I think
It's $10 a month.
$10, I'm sorry, $10
for the last
a
3
month.
months
So
of
it's
this year. and it
$120
rem-
on
yeah,
an
it
annual
remains to be
basis.
seen if they'll do it next year.
You know, rather than throw a fee out there and get people more worked up, you know, as far as we have pay enough taxes, you know, I think I would have looked at it that way. Cut something else or something, but don't. Everything's a fee. That fireplace, when I saw that in the paper, I thought, boy, Oshkosh is going out on a limb on that one. You know, it's just fee crazy. And I'm sure the city administrator doesn't like that. Sorry, Dick. But what I'm saying, but I think privately, I think even the elected officials, if they're watching, I think I think some of them I would better agree that it's just a case where I hate to suggest raising taxes. That doesn't sound good, but we'll throw a fee out there. And I think that created more controversy than if they would have just raised the taxes, not said a word, and if people saw it in there. It's what I just told you before. We raised our garbage pickup. Nobody, and I mean nobody, complained. On
But
that.
that's where the levy freeze comes in. That wasn't an option to raise the taxes.
Well, what you got to do is when you got a plan for that. We did, honest to God, we did. When I knew that was happening, and I saw this in the works before it even became law, what we did is when I was on that budget, I remember back 5 years it'd be now. I said, look, if we still want to maintain the same quality of maintaining our roads, it's nice to go cut the taxes, you know, as far as that goes, but what happens when you have a project and you really need that money? It's going to be a lot harder to raise taxes, or if there is a freeze, now you're gypped. You can't do anything. So what I did, we didn't change the budget. I was asked at the budget meeting, what do you feel we still need to maintain the roads? I gave a figure. That's our biggest expense, by the way, is the roads. And I'm a firm believer in paving roads, taking care of those issues. Because this worked in Omro. I served also years on that board. And I wanted a 3-year program at that time, and to fix the roads. In other words, over the years, the trend was, let's put a little coal mix in there, and this is every year. And the roads are terrible. I mean, you can go down some of the roads in Oshkosh, and that's the way some of the roads were getting in the town of Omro. So I got it at an annual meeting, or a special meeting. This is where the electors get to vote. And I said, if you do the 3-year program, you'll address all the roads. We not only did that, but we had a surplus at the end. And the funny part about that was, and I'm still proud of that, is the fact that the DNR, perfect timing, came along, and we had a landfill there that we had to close up, and that was going to run us, I think, I'm within $1,000 or two, $52,000. We had like $40-some thousand to put towards that. So one guy says, oh, we got to give that back to the taxpayer rather than, you know. And I said, well, what's the point in doing that if next year you got to raise their taxes that much? So they all thought about it, and they thought, yeah, the electorate thought that's a good idea. And that's how we closed the landfill. But what I'm trying to say is it's proper planning. You got to have a capital expense where you know, this is what we're going to take care of, and you keep that figure so that when you get a freeze, all right, you're not affected. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
As opposed to cutting cutting that way down before you put the freeze on. Does that make sense to us?
Sure.
Okay.
One other approach to the issue of taxes, Dick, is, and is one that's been suggested, is to either increase or alter the state sales tax. And that would help pay for state government and also help to, hopefully, lower property taxes. How do you feel about either changing or increasing the state sales tax?
Sales tax, I don't care to see raised. I don't think that's, to me, it's a regressive type tax for that matter. I really don't see that at all. I don't see that as solving the issues. I mean, what's it going to be the next time? You raise it a little higher, or are you going to put another excise tax on something? Everything is taxed that way. Sales tax, no. I can understand, in fact, where Mark Harris, the county executive, is coming from. He's got a certain amount of budget to work with to maintain all the services, and there's only so much you can cut for that matter. But I think maybe you got to look at better planning. I'm not saying Mark doesn't have the capability of being a better planner, but maybe he's newer at it. Maybe he's got to sit down with the highway department, and they got to look at alternative ways to cutting rather than always depending on raising taxes to address the issue. And that's one of the reasons why, I tell you the truth, I vote mostly Republican because of that view. It's like Democrats have a tendency, and I'm just generalizing, to maybe always throw more money at a program, always a new program, rather than looking at, I love tax credits, I've said that before, but looking at another way to cut something out that we can't use right now.
Except for the current Congress, of course.
Well, for that matter, that's a federal level. Actually, there's another point, though. The feds, that's another thing. When there's mandates from the feds to the state, then somebody should pay for it rather than the local body. That's another thing that kind of bothers me a little bit. You know what this all boils down to? You need a legislator that's willing to how do they say it? The squeaky wheel gets the grease. You have to be active. You got to be proactive. You got to be stirring up, not causing riots or rebel against your government, but you have to be active. You have to be involved in the process and what's going on. Above all, you got to have a closeness with your local bodies of government. I've got the city of Waupun, I've got the village of Rosendale and Oakville, parts of the city of Oshkosh, and the towns, plenty of towns. You have to be proactive with each one of those towns. And I propose, and that's what's missing here, and that's what I'm getting from the rest of the district, and I mean this. And I can take anybody with me, and I'll prove it to you what these board members want. They want somebody, and I think this is natural with anybody of the electorate I'm talking about. They want somebody to come to their board meeting and say, hey, I'm Dick Spanbauer, I'm your legislator, this is what I got from Madison for you, this is what's going to affect you guys. Or there's a new grant coming out, if you guys apply for it and go through this program, you'll be able to fund this. Or if I don't have anything, just to be at the meeting and say, hey, I don't have nothing for you from Madison, that's new, but listen, if you got something I can take down to Madison, I'd be more than happy to do it. Those guys have told me in those board meetings repeatedly, the last election and this election, when I've gone to those town board meetings, that's what they see in a legislator, somebody that's in contact and communication, not by email. I had a couple people tell me, oh, she emails me, or whatever. And I guess that's okay, but it's always that personal touch, they say, I think that makes the difference. When people really feel, they want to see, feel, and hear from their elected officials, hands-on. It's like when I run for election, whether it's been a supervisor or a chairman, in this case the assembly race, I go to the doors. You know why I go to the doors? It's not just to let people know that I'm Dick Spanbauer and this is what I look like, this is what I stand for, and I'm telling you in person, but they get a rapport and they get a feel from that person. I also get a lot of ideas from these people. I've gotten ideas over the years, I've been involved over 25 years, from the ordinary citizen, just by going to the door. And you hear a lot of, okay, you got a solution? Yeah, I do. That drainage problem you got, I remember one time when I was in on and on, these people have a lot of good ideas. You learn a lot from your people that are your constituency. And it'd be a fool not to take advantage of that fact of listening to people, because that's what a good politician is. A good elected official listens to his constituency. And right now that's not happening.
Do you think it's just a problem in the 53rd, or do you think that's a problem overall with government
Overall,
that they don't listen?
Yes, and I say that for both parties. I've been all over it, whether it's vacationing someplace or I know other people in other areas, and it's the same thing. What happens is, unfortunately, it's not with all elected officials. You get a lot of years in, call it your tenure, like you do in the university,
Right.
and you get that feeling that I can't be beat. You know, every time, you know, election comes, I'm either unopposed or I smash my opponent. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying all legislators do this, but they get that feeling after a while to a point where they actually get complacent. And if you don't have a check and balance, and I mean with somebody maybe running against them raises issues. The only time you hear from Carol Owens is basically, and something in the mail or the paper she got a farmer award, is because I'm running against her. That's about it. The 2 years in between, you don't hear nothing. And I'll tell you another thing. When you get complacent, you lose the incentive really to understand the issues, the bills that are confronting you in Madison. A lot of times, if you're leader of the House, we'll call it down there, I think John Gard, that's another story there. But anyway, yeah, I don't want to get into that one.
We don't have time for that.
Yeah, okay, yeah. But I think actually the point remains is when somebody says you should vote yes on this bill or no on this bill. In other words, if you're taking the point of view, well, whatever the majority tells me, that's the way I'm going to vote. I know there's politicians that do that on both sides. It's human nature. And what happens is you lose the incentive really to really look at a bill and say, hey, being a Republican, is this bill really good for the district, or is this Representative Nelson up here in Manitowoc, he's got something that I think that would really benefit the 53rd district. You've got to be able to weigh those bills. And if you're always voting along party lines, strict party lines, and I know the Republicans are going to kill me for this, but what I'm trying to say is you have to be your own man. You have to be independent to a point. You can't be somebody's puppet. And if you see a good bill and it's out there and a Democrat's got it, you've got to consider it. And when you're in so long in one party, I say the same thing with a Democrat, you have that tendency to just go with the flow.
Sure.
And pretty soon you don't hear that you know, no, I think this is wrong. I think we should go this bill. All of a sudden is, how do you want me to vote? Yes, okay. What time is the vote? All right. Yeah, just because you go down and vote yes or no on a bill doesn't make you a great legislator.
Dick, what do you think are, you know, some of the more, I mean, there's a ton of social issues facing us in Wisconsin, but what does Dick Spanbauer think are, you know, a few of the more significant ones that we're wrestling with right now?
Well, child care is one issue, for that matter. I know that children get neglected. There's programs for women, that especially that are, you know, don't have husbands or anything like that. But it's the child care that bothers me a little bit, and the way they get undertreated, for that matter, because there's always a lack of funds. A lot of times there's funds that are cut there, you know, and that kind of bothers me. As far as that's one area as far as child care goes.
Okay.
But I don't know that we could take probably hours to dig into other programs and whatever. But the first thing that pops to my mind is child care.
Okay. And we heard how you feel about abortion. You're opposed to that.
Yes.
Homosexual marriage, that of course is a hot topic right now with an amendment coming up to our Constitution in November. Where do you stand on that issue?
Well, 2 years ago I was against it, and I still am. And some people might point the finger and say, oh, that guy hates us. And that's not true. And I wish, and you know something, there are some gays that understand, and I know some gays, for that matter. I get around a lot with a lot of people, and you know, we have them in our town too, for that matter. And I've talked to them, and they understand. They know where I'm coming from. That's my belief. I don't believe it's really the way it was intended, whether you want to talk from the beginning of time or whatever. But they say, I've had people say, oh yeah, you're a Christian and all this stuff. I'm a chaplain assistant. I do some volunteer work. And that's sure you're going to say that. But on the other hand, if you allowed this to happen, one thing would happen in the industry. they would also be eligible for health insurance benefits. Now, that sounds really great. The problem is that would put a lot of business on its ear. And all of a sudden, how many people that they have that are same-sex or civil gay unions would have to turn around and provide these benefits. What would that do also to the economy? What would it do to business? That's another aspect. I've looked at it that way as well. I'm not a hater of gays. I firmly believe that it's a wrong choice. I really do.
This isn't just a gay issue. This is an issue that, I mean, this amendment would affect heterosexual couples who are just living in domestic partnership type situations. And there are plenty of companies, Fortune 500, Fortune 100, lots and lots of companies, cities right here in Wisconsin that offer domestic partnership benefits, and they're doing very well. They're not failing.
That's not a problem, Cheryl. If they want to do that and fund that themselves, that's fine. That's their business. What I'm trying to say is that I don't feel that it should be allowed on a state level, and just given a green light to go ahead, and that's fine, and you're eligible for benefits and the whole bit. And I don't believe that's right.
Okay.
As far as what the state is concerned, I think that's where I say no.
Okay. Conceal and carry legislation.
Well, I'm glad you brought that one up. 2 years ago, I was against the concealed weapons law, and I'll tell you why. And I took a beating on that. You know why I took a beating on it? You'll always have that 10% that'll figure you're anti-hunter. Now, I hunt. I've got guns. My kid and I hunt. I love to get out there. I really do. I have nothing against having possession of weapons. I really don't. We're talking about concealment. Here was the thing. 2 years ago, I was against it. You know why I was against it? Because actually it'd be 3 years ago I was asked this. There was no restrictions at that time at all on carrying. Nothing. That was really concrete. And I could not take an issue and support it without restrictions. They have since then put restrictions on it, or they would, if they brought it up in a bill, there are things where you can't carry it in a tavern, you can't have it by a school. There are certain restrictions. I'm comfortable with that. I don't have a problem with that. But at the time when I was asked, I was dead set against it if there was going to be no limitations or restrictions to carrying that weapon. So I support, actually I'm a member of the NRA. I'm a good supporter of the Second Amendment.
Okay.
Okay. Just a question about your district. We've mentioned this a couple of times. It stretches from parts of the city down into, well, pretty far south from here. What are there certain issues that are predominate in, say, the southern part versus things that are happening in the northern part that you have to be mindful of as a viewer of the legislator?
No, they're all basically the same as far as that goes. People have the same concerns all over, and that's what I addressed earlier. There's a lot of things I'm for, I'd like to see improved, but I gave you the three major things: the health insurance, the keeping the jobs in Wisconsin, and education. That's universal. Whether it's up at Indian Point Road in the town of Oshkosh, or it's down in the city of Waupun or the town of Empire. It's basically the same.
But parts of the district are agricultural as opposed to other parts that are urban.
Well, the one problem I think the state of Wisconsin has, and I'm afraid that a lot of people non-farmers don't understand this. There is a lot of farms that are going out. Tremendous amount of farms that are going out. These people, the only way they can finance their retirement is through selling their land. And generally it goes to subdivisions. Once that goes under concrete, it's lost and gone forever. The younger people, I think, and I'm just generalizing because there are a lot of younger people that are really understanding what's going on with farming. Actually, there's a lot more in education in the high schools and that about farming than there was in the colleges, if they go to the colleges. But I'm finding out that really there's an apathy with farming. And for an example, I'm an ethanol person. I really got hot with ethanol about 4 or 5 years ago. I took a brutal beating for that because what had happened, in my opinion, is we had a feed mill out by us that wanted to put an ethanol plant out there. And the city of Oshkosh was dead set against that. And I won't go into details there because it's pretty touchy. There are other things that went on. I was told very harshly. It wasn't even a congenial type phone call. It was like if we're not having that ethanol, you're not going to have it. And the petitions came out, and indirectly from Oshkosh people that work in Oshkosh, that live out in the town of Algoma, and they actually scared the dickens out of the town of Algoma people. I mean, they had them believing that that place, if it'll blow up, it'll look like a big mushroom, and it'll wipe out the town of Algoma, and the stink is going to be so fierce, you're going to be shutting your windows when it's 100 degrees outside, and I could go on and on and on. You're going to run out of water because it uses large amounts of water. I couldn't even talk to people, but one thing I did do, anytime I get hot on something, or even if it's a town board meeting, I do a lot of research on ethanol. I can't tell you the hours I spent on the internet or talking to commerce people, Department of the Interior. I've got all the facts, anything I could with ethanol, but it was useless. Do you know why? Because most people didn't want to listen. So what happens today? Not just today, Thursday, we're here taping this, but I mean present day is the fact that people are, with the gas prices are going up like crazy. All of a sudden you get a couple people once in a while going, yeah, you know, Dick, maybe that wasn't too bad an idea having ethanol. Then they're finding out that the town of Utica that got it, which I helped them get that, I gave them all the information I could. You're finding out the taxes dropped. It is employing people. The canning business there in Pickett's, that was gone. They bought that now, and they're taking the wet feed and they're packaging it. I guess they're drying it and packaging it. They're employing more people. It's another tax base for the town of Utica. It's creating jobs. But here's one thing too about ethanol. Why should we send our money overseas to people that just soon kill us? I'd rather keep that money at home. And that's what you do when you buy ethanol. And I'll tell you another thing. This is 5 years ago, and I haven't checked it since then. But we send over $100 million less overseas for gas, or oil, I should say, for each ethanol plant. Represents, I was told that by the Department of Commerce, that each plant, one plant, we save over $100 million for one plant a year from being sent overseas for oil. Now take that times how many plants we have. I think it's a great situation. I do. There's other things that we need to do. Maybe there's wind energy, there's hybrids. I like the fact that we're going now in the right direction. We're at least going exploratory as far as what we need, you know, and not relying on petroleum. But it bothers me tremendously when I have to send money, our country sends money overseas to people that just, they can't stand us. I'd rather keep that money here in this country. Ethanol is not the total answer. It's maybe not the perfect solution, but it sure is a start. And
are there other things that can be done to help the agricultural sector?
And we only have like about 30 seconds.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, I'm very serious. So
keep the farmers on the land. One thing about farming, farming land to a farmer is like family. It's been in their family for generations. There are farmers out there, if they can pay the taxes to stay on their farms, they'll do that rather than sell their farms. People have to understand that there's a very close relationship with farming and their land. I mean, they're like married to one another, if you understand what I'm trying to drive at here. We keep the farmers on. They're a business too. You give them tax credits, keep them going.
All right, very good. Dick, thanks so much for being here. It was a pleasure to have you back again. It was an hour, believe it or not. And Miles, thanks as always for being here. It was a real pleasure to have you filling in for Tony, and he should be back next week.
Are we done completely?
Just about. I'm just wrapping things up here. Okay. And as always, thanks to you for allowing us into your homes for the last hour. Remember to go to the polls on Tuesday, September 12th. For the primary election, and again on November 7th for the general. Take good care until we see you next time, and keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.